Okay, Matt's on mute, but I assume that he just pressed record. Perfect. All right, so welcome to the April 2nd CHAOSS Common Metrics Working Group meeting. If you can go ahead and add your name to the attendees along with how you're feeling right now. So thanks, Georg. I like that little addition to our attendee lists. Okay. Go ahead and get started while people are doing that. We have, so for the agenda, we have a couple of things. Review comments on the metric that we have in the continuous metric contributions feedback cycle. So we'll take a look at that first, and then we'll review the action items and notes from the previous meeting, and then continue working on the time to close metric. Should I, here, hang on, let me share, I'll share my screen so that we can, whoops. Since Georg says that makes the videos better.
It does. And honestly, I get all the recordings. So if you're ever a screen sharer and you're like, whoops, out on video, just send me a note and I will happily cut that out.
Oh, there it is. I don't know why I always struggle with the sharing buttons. Okay, you can see that, right?
Yep, we see a window and the screen.
Okay, perfect. Now I just have to get the other windows where I can see them. Okay, cool. Whoops, I'm clicking on stuff I don't mean to click on. All right, so we'll start with this metric that we have getting ready for release. Okay, so we have a couple of comments. Sean, do you want to talk about your comment? The code review comment? And I'll go ahead and open this up too so that we can see what the metric looks like. Oops. Sean, are you on mute or are you not talking?
I am on mute. Okay, let me open my comment up.
I have your comment on the screen share, if that's easier.
I think a code review is a category. Yes. So this is about new metric types of contributions. So yeah, code review is separate from code. You're almost right. Somebody says.
What was your initial point, Sean?
My main point is that code review is a distinct kind of activity from writing code. and I suppose the one person who commented after me only is disagreeing that sometimes new people do code reviews, which is that's perfectly fine. But I think they're generally agreeing with my point that for a type of contribution, a review is separate from writing code. So code review is a type of activity. So it's a type of contribution type that's not listed. That's all my point was.
So maybe we just add that as a bullet under coding, because we have coding as sort of like a bucket and we have it, it says could be separated further, which I think is true. But I think your point is that you have coding and then you have code review. And even though coding has a bunch of categories within it, code review is a separate skill.
It's a separate kind of activity, I guess.
Yeah.
And It's but I don't think it's the same. So I don't think like it's a subset of coding.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
sort of thinking we could add it as a bullet between coding
yeah,
and bug triaging.
yeah. I think it's a separate bullet at the same level as coding and bug triaging. That was
Okay.
my only point.
Yep, I
Okay.
agree.
Does somebody want to take the action to?
Yeah, I'll do it right.
Okay. Okay.
Do we want to keep the parentheses around coding? It's the only one that has parentheses. You
Oh,
know what I
like
mean?
with
Right now it says coding can be separated further, e.g. It's like like a lot of caveats in there.
I mean, I guess it depends if we want to separate it. Like when we've talked about bug resolution, so we pointed out sometimes that we need two developers, one with front end expertise and another with back end expertise.
I guess
So,
but we could put in parentheses anything, so we could say writing articles,
right,
parentheses, for opensource.com,
So if we
academic
do,
articles, e.g. methods, theory.
right,
You could like do that for everything.
you're right.
I would almost,
You're right.
I agree with you, Matt. I think we could maybe just delete the parentheses, but
Yeah.
maybe if we do that, we should say writing code and then code review and have
I'll do
those be
that.
the first two bullets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Writing code and reviewing code is just what I'll put.
Okay. So Matt, I'm just gonna add this as an action item, even though you're doing it here right now, I think.
Yes.
Just adding this to the notes where I can't type. Okay. The other thing we need to do is review action items and notes from the previous meeting. So Sean, you were going to look at, so we had a spreadsheet, we looked at the spreadsheet for work in process metrics and started talking about the metrics to work on next. So Sean, you took an action item to look at language distribution within a project.
I haven't finished that yet.
Okay.
So,
I am in the same boat. I have also not done mine. So I'll just add these. Follow up on these actions next month. Let's see, were there other action items? No. I don't think so. Okay, so Sean and I made no progress on our action items. I had such good intents. Hear children in the background. This is one of the things, I think this is sort of the upside of the whole pandemic thing, is like you get to see everybody else's like kids and pets that you don't always get to see because a lot of people work in an office.
Yeah, it's very human.
I've seen so many adorable children and pets this week. It's been nice. Okay, so the only other agenda item we have, which is kind of a working session, is to continue working on the time to close metric. Does anybody else have anything that they want to talk about before we dive into that bit?
No, I mean, I guess my only thing with Common is I'm always just wondering how we go about identifying metrics that could live in Common. Is it Common's responsibility to do that? Sometimes I'm a little concerned that in the other working groups, they're like, well, we'll just toss this over to Common. It really is just this like catch-all, and the intention is not that Common will simply do the work, but I don't know. There seems to be some directionality here, and do we want to do we care about that? That's just a logistical thing.
So things get put into common when sometimes when people just think they could be used in more than one. and
Yeah, and
it's,
the direction
get,
seems to be from the other working groups to common. And if that's fine, then that's fine.
Yeah.
It's the only working group that kind of seems to function that way.
It is.
So every other working group kind of specifies their own sets of metrics. And I'm not saying common doesn't as well, but they're also, common seems to be a recipient of the cast off metrics from other working groups. I don't mean to make it sound bad. I just
So it's the land of misfit metrics. We've
Yes,
talked
it
about
is.
this before.
Yeah.
And does that matter? That's all.
I think I'm okay with that. Like if somebody thinks that the metric belongs in common, then I think
Okay.
I think that in most cases so far that's always made sense, and it hasn't been really an issue.
Okay.
I do agree though that we should also, in addition to that, also be proactive about defining some metrics that we think are important. So I think organizational affiliation was kind of like that. That was sort of how we formed this. But one of the things that we've talked about, and we keep having other metrics to define, so we haven't really spent enough time, I think, doing this, but we keep talking about going through and looking at the metrics that Augur and Grimoire Lab already use but haven't been defined anywhere in the project.
Yep.
The ones that are, common across some of the working groups. And I do think that we should make an effort to start to define some of those.
Okay.
So, anytime anybody wants to have a look at some of the tools and some of the metrics that we've implemented in the tools but that we haven't defined yet, I think we could certainly add those to the spreadsheet for things to look at in the future or look at next. I think that's certainly legit.
Okay, cool. I was going to the spreadsheet to take a look at.
Do we want to take a quick look at the spreadsheet? Probably couldn't hurt before we dive into the metric. Got it.
Just
here.
Put it in the chat. Yep, and then I can put it here in the.
Just share it. Because we do have a couple that have sort of started, like the contributor location and employer location. We've got Google Docs where those are started but not released. Lines of files, I think that one came from the Grimoire Labs schema, which is kind of what I was talking about before, tools that have implemented things but that we haven't used.
Yep.
Language distribution, which was the one that Sean has the action item to look at.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I had the action item to look at, is that actually in here anywhere? Code changes. Oh, I was going to look at some of the metrics that Evolution's already defined, so those don't need to be in here yet until we decide that there's something we need to do. Any questions on the spreadsheet?
No, I think it's something that, like, on my morning jogs, I'll start to think about, like, what are those metrics for common? I think about super boring things on my runs, but not saying this is boring, but
oh, come on, this isn't the most exciting thing in your day.
So I don't listen to podcasts or music, so I just kind of think, and I think this is something good to think about as to what those new common metrics can be.
Yeah, I was listening to podcasts while I run. Maybe I should try running and just thinking.
I just listen to my footsteps, and my dog.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So last thing we have on the agenda is to look at the time to close metric, which is here. I'm not sure we have two Google Docs here.
Oh, one that was.
Oh, the metric spreadsheet. So that doesn't belong here. I'm gonna move that.
Move it up.
Yeah. Whoops. Okay. Does somebody want to facilitate the working on the time to close metric? I'll be honest, I keep muting for coughing fits because my allergies are really, really bad right now. So I'm maybe not the best person to talk a whole bunch.
Sure. Could you? Could you tell me briefly, without talking too much, what your goal is here?
Yeah, so one of the things we've been doing for a while in the diversity and inclusion working group is we kind of pick a metric and then we just start talking about it and we start writing and we see how much progress we can make during the meeting with sort of the time we have left.
Yeah.
So my thought was that I think we started this in the last meeting and then yeah, just kind of start working through this because we have a bunch of stuff in implementation, but we don't really have anything in the
Okay.
objectives. And we probably want to talk about whether or not the description's right. So just kind of that sort of thing. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yep. So why don't we go ahead and if we could bring this up, I'll also share it here in the chat.
Do you want me to stop sharing so that you can share so that you can drive this?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to continue to share it? Okay, either way.
Let's just have you share it. You're already up.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we have responsiveness. This is in the focus area of time. So I guess maybe we could do this kind of verbally as the question and then start working on the description and the objective. So could you all take a look at the question? Which time passes between when an event is created and closed?
Last time we debated whether event is the right term here.
Yeah, I don't think I was just actually that up whether or not event is the right term. So I'm trying to think. I don't know that outside of diversity and inclusion that we use the term event in a metric, and it's around demographics, I think, attendee and speaker demographics. An event in that case means basically a conference. So perhaps we could think of a better word than event.
What do we use in things like some of the other working groups like evolution and others to talk about it? Because it's really how much time passes between when this thing, this activity, is there a standard term that we use in some of the other working groups for it?
I think the other working groups, they're more localized. It's like a bit or an issue or a pull request. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit more precise, and it sounds like one is trying to be more of a thing that captures all of those things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is intended to be, this could be an event, it could be a pull request, it could be, sorry, this could be an issue, it could be a pull request, it could be any number, it could be a mailing list response.
Yep.
Well, how about we start that way? How much time passes from creating to closing? Issue, PR, message, issue. I don't know what other events we have. Code review. Are there other events that we are talking about that can be open and closed? Support ticket. Because if there are only these 3 items, then we might as well list them out and look for a more generic name later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thoughts on this?
Does time to close? Okay. Closing issue. Code review. Is it the time passes between? Is the time that passes between a pull request being submitted and a code review? Is that the, what is the time for code review?
I think that's an attempt not to use pull request because that's a GitHub specific type of
Oh, right.
code review.
Okay.
Am I right, Georg? I'm
It
speculating.
is.
Okay.
We've been talking about this for 3 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, I know, because even people using GitLab still say PR.
Yeah, and code review is a little bit, I feel like
It sounds
that
like
is
code
a
review.
component of a pull request. So in GitHub, you have a pull request and then you have a review that's a part of that. And then so I might review a pull request in like Kubernetes. It's like something to a markdown file, and I'll be like, maybe change this and this and this, and that's like a review. And then the person goes in and they add more commits, and then they resolve my review, and then somebody else submits a review with different things. So I feel like code review is also a little bit misleading because of the way that GitHub uses that term. But I'm also not sure. I don't know what else to call it other than yeah, I don't know. I understand the problem. I don't have a good solution.
So I propose to stick with code review. That's what we've been using in the evolution working group all along. So
Okay, fair enough.
an operation.
Oh, operation.
It's thesaurus.com. I went from event to action and it's an operation, and that's it. An action, operation. I don't know. Those seem appropriate to me.
Okay. Well, until we find something better.
Okay. And I don't, that's fine. Okay, so then the description, maybe we could take a look at that. So if you could give it a read real quickly.
I can read it out loud for the benefit of everyone if you like.
That's great. You can read it out loud.
The time to close is the total amount of time that passes between the creation and closing of an operation, such as an issue, code review, or support ticket. The operation needs to have an open and closed state, as is often the case in review processes, question and answer forums, and ticketing systems.
Did somebody just rewrite that? Because that reads pretty well based on the question.
Somebody did some work on that, I think,
Yeah.
while we were talking about the one above, because that's not what it looked like 5 minutes ago.
That wasn't me.
So thank you. Thank you, whoever did that.
That's uncanny how those go together.
I
Thanks,
may have
Derek.
had something to do with this.
Any thoughts on the description? Sean, you were going to say something.
No, I was just saying I did not make the change.
Okay.
So like we're all in the, I don't know who on the call made the change, but they're being silent about it.
So what's
No, it was Georg. I
Okay.
think it looks good. I like the changes, the updates to it. Operation's sort of growing on me, so we'll see how that works.
do we do the related metrics in CHAOSS? That second paragraph. Do we do that in other metrics?
Yes, we do.
Do we?
In the description?
Yeah. Just that link out. It's a cross link to issues
Yeah, no, my question is,
closed issue resolution.
Do we do that in the description of other metrics?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Oh,
I can pull up an example if you like.
No, that's okay. I believe you. I guess I hadn't really seen it in the description.
There's only 1 or 2 metrics right now that have that, and we haven't come up with a better way of doing it yet.
Yeah, looking down through the rest of the doc, I don't necessarily see a better place for it.
What does it link? Does it link out to the? Could we? Is this a released metric? I'm always like, mortified is not the right word, but like kind of conscious of hyperlinking in documents. So is issue resolution a released metric?
Issue resolution duration is a released metric. I pulled up the link. I'll
Okay.
put it in.
Is it like, okay, so is it on CHAOSS?
So we should change the link to the released metric instead of the.
Yeah, on the website.
It will now link to the released metric.
Cool.
Okay.
When we link to a released metric, does that don't the links change for the newly released metrics? So if we link to it in this release, which is the V2 January release, whatever we called it, when we issue the next set of released metrics, this would point to an old release of the metric. No, those links persist on the website. So if we link to it on the website, it would be good.
Yes,
Okay.
it will always link to the most current version on the website. The only issue we may run into is that a metric changes its name, and so the URL changes.
Okay.
And then the link breaks.
Okay. Well, we should redirect those if that happens.
That's also good to know if we're providing cross-linking, then if there is a metric that is proposing to have its name changed, maybe a fairly serious conversation needs to be had in the implications of doing that.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. All right. So if we take a look at objectives, really to me, objectives is why do we do this? Why do we need this metric?
I mean, it's an important way of determining how responsive a project is, which is sort of a circular definition. So let me get out my thesaurus.
Important way of determining what? How responsive?
Yeah, but we want to use a word other than responsive since it's in the name.
Yeah, I'm just jotting down ideas at the moment. So maybe people could take a minute or two and just, under objectives, just write down why we care about time to close. If we can just capture them all, then we can kind of formulate them into something a bit more collective. Okay. So I guess a couple things that we can, is everybody good? at least to start talking around these points.
Mm-hmm.
We can add more points as we move forward. A couple things. One is a larger question for metrics in general. So right now we are inconsistent on how we represent objectives. So sometimes objectives are a paragraph, a narrative. Sometimes objectives are bullet points. And personally, I'd like to start standardizing one way or the other. So questions always look the same. Descriptions are always narratives, I think. But objectives go back and forth. Or do we care? And if we don't care, then that's fine with me. So this isn't a question on this metric.
I tend to like bullet points for objectives because objectives should be sort of self-contained, whereas a description is more of a narrative.
Okay.
I also like the contrast that it creates between the display of the description and the display of the objectives.
Okay.
It looks visually appealing.
I also like bullet points for objectives. Sean?
Yeah.
If you say narrative, then you're still losing 3-1. So doesn't matter. All right. So what I actually agree. I'm probably going to bring this forward, or if I'm not in a meeting in one of the working groups for folks, could you, as you're building out new metrics, could you make a recommendation to move towards objectives as bullet points?
Certainly.
Yeah, I think that makes it easier to understand.
All right, so then taking a look at these bullet points specifically, perhaps we could go through who wrote the bullet point and maybe describe what it is real quickly. So Sean, I wrote it, but those are your words. An important way of determining how responsive a community is.
Mm-hmm.
So is that, does anybody have questions on what that means, or?
So I guess we might get to the reason. So while we want to understand responsiveness, there's a pretty good understanding that the faster a community responds, the more likely new contributors are to continue to participate. So responsiveness is a metric that seems to affect how well you capture new contributors as ongoing contributors. And that's I think that's probably the main reason that we want to measure responsiveness.
An effort to attract and retain contributors?
Yeah. And it's more, I guess it's more retain new contributors because they've already been attracted if they did something. And it's about retaining new contributors.
Oops, I was talking on mute, which is related to the one that I wrote, which I just moved up next so that we could talk about it because it's pretty similar and maybe duplicative. I also feel like it's a bit judgy, and maybe we don't want to. I feel like it's kind of a judgment, and maybe we don't want that as our objective.
Which the retaining new contributors piece?
No, that one's good. The one that I wrote, I feel is a little judgy. The one below it, the impacts inclusivity for new contributors.
Why is it judgy to you?
It feels like it's making a judgment call that, I don't know, if the community is responsive, I don't know, maybe it's not.
Yeah, well,
but it does feel, oh, go ahead.
It doesn't sound judgy to me because it's essentially it's an elaboration on the point about retaining new contributors generally, and that does have an impact on inclusivity because as we try to attract a more diverse set of contributors, doing the things required to retain new contributors will have an effect on diversity. I think it's a matter of fact statement. I don't think it's judgy.
So I just added the word include
Hmm.
on one above it. And
Oh,
include and
I
inclusivity are
see.
kind
I
of
see. So it's
to
it's
being.
not, doesn't feel like a diversity stab, which would be, I think, Don's concern, possibly,
What do you
that.
think about that, Don? Number
Yeah, I just
one.
changed it to be inclusive
Yeah.
instead of include.
Yeah.
Be
What
inclusive,
I'm,
attract and retain new contributors.
what I'm also thinking here is then rather than saying it is, we can say something to the that is responsiveness is an effort. Well, okay, we already say it's an effort, but I don't know if there's a way to make it less pointed. I don't know what how I'm trying to say this. It doesn't come out right.
And I think this one's really not just new, but new and existing contributors.
Which one?
Okay, I've figured out what I wanted to do here. Determining how responsive a community is can help efforts to be inclusive, attract, and retain. That way we give it as an option that people can use it that way.
Inclusive.
And then we can probably delete the one that
Yes. Yep.
one that I did because now I think it's a complete duplicate. Okay.
Okay. The next one was mine. So I don't know if this matters or not, so people can give feedback. So it's as we can see issues or operations that have very wide time frames, or other operations that have very short time frames, that we can investigate those long ones in more detail, so we can understand if there are particular organizations involved in the long ones, which may be an interesting sign. That there may be particular people involved in the long ones, which might also be a similarly interesting thing to understand. That some of the long operations perhaps include many changes. So for example, a very large PR that we may need to work on.
Yeah.
Just whatever those characteristics might be, it might give us a way to kind of identify areas of interest within the project. Does that make sense to people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I know after you explain it, but just reading identifying characteristics of operations that close quickly or slowly is, it does not give me enough information to know what to do with that information.
Okay.
Or why. So I added some of the things that you mentioned in parentheses. I don't know how to incorporate that.
Is it, I mean, would it be judgy to say knowing people or organizations involved in long time frame operations? I mean, we're not calling anybody out in particular, but.
Maybe assess effectivity just to make that a little more concise. Yeah.
Is it effectiveness or efficiency? Time is usually efficiency.
I think you're right. I think it's efficiency.
I have never heard the word effectivity, and I just looked it up. Isn't that weird? I just have never heard that word before.
I didn't make it up, did I? Because that's a possibility.
No, you didn't make it up. It's a real word. And I mean, it means exactly what you think it would mean. I just never, just never heard it used. I'm going to use it today somewhere.
You're gonna write an entire paper about effectivity in
I'm
open
just going
source.
to say it a bunch tonight. When I'm cool. All right. Identify. Are we okay with number 2?
Yeah.
Identify bias. So who wrote that?
I think I wrote that.
Okay.
And this is getting to, so identify bias in who a community responds to faster or slower is a way of identifying discrimination. I didn't want to say discrimination. I just said bias. A little bit more neutral.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that we have a tendency of responding to people who we know and trust and like faster, whereas we sometimes ignore newcomers or people who are alien or people who don't write the issue or pull request in a way that we like to see it. And so it's a stronger hurdle for us to engage with it. And so just to identify that bias and
Would make sense to
keep
me.
us in check and honest.
Yeah, I really like the idea. I'm not as comfortable with the way it's worded. Like I like the identify bias piece, but I feel like the faster or slower,
Perhaps more readily.
oh, maybe.
I would probably phrase it as something akin to bias toward known individuals.
But it could also be other biases too. It could be gender based. It could be race.
I even think it could be corporate.
So
Could be
bias
corporate.
in response time based on multiple factors.
Hi, Samantha, by the way.
Also,
Nice.
good morning.
Join us.
My video is not on because I was a horrible person and chose to binge watch Star Trek Picard instead of waking up my alarm on time. So
Totally worth it.
Well done. Good life decisions there.
Yeah.
You're amongst peers here. Okay,
I felt like they didn't do enough episodes yet of Picard. I was really sad to see if that was the last in the season. But that's neither
very,
here nor
very
there.
good. But
All
I'm
right, well,
excited to see what they'll set up for Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
that's the one I'm on right now.
There haven't been any new ones, right, of Discovery?
I just finished season 1. I'm
Oh, okay.
about to start season 2.
Season 3 starts in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, nice. That's exciting. So you got time to catch up, Georg.
Excellent. I'm canceling all meetings next week. Okay, back to
I'm
objective.
doing that for Final Fantasy VII. I'm sorry, I did not mean to derail everything.
This is great information because it just affirms that I should probably watch Picard. So
I keep hearing I should watch that. So
yes,
Yes, you should.
helps. So I like how this reads now. 3. I don't know what other people think. Identify bias.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Is it identify bias in who? Of who? What's the word here? Bias in
The preposition seems fine.
okay.
Identify a response time bias. So just switch them around and you'll probably get rid of that oddity.
No. Sorry, I don't know how to make this sound better.
I feel like we lost the bias when you did that.
Yeah.
I think this gets the point across, at least to me. Who wrote number 4?
Oh, I also wrote that.
Okay.
Number 4 is about, well, just what it says here. I think responsiveness is a leading metric for community health.
Sorry, I know we moved on to the next one, but I just rewrote the number 3. I'm not sure that I made it better.
I'm just going to accept all your things.
Oops.
I think that works just the same.
Okay.
Too many responses in the sentence.
I know.
Can I get rid of that? Too many responses in this sentence.
Yes, actually.
There's a pun there, but I can't find it.
But wait a minute. We lost the time bit. Timeliness. We have conflicting edits that yours timeliness responses.
Responding to different
Or just
that?
identified bias in timeliness or timeliness responses. That's good.
Okay, sorry, we can move on to the next one.
No, and I like that a little bit better too, because the prior had the word who in it, and I'm not one of those people that thinks of companies as people. So this covers companies as well. So the way it's written, I think can cover corporate affiliation. Gary, I simply just dropped off on number 4. I just dropped off your comment that responsiveness is an important metric. An objective of this metric can be to detect early slowdown in community activity. Were you okay with that?
Yeah. I think the detect.
Does anybody have a comment?
It's a leading metric. That's basically means the same thing.
Yeah. Well, we could add that like ending to all of these objectives. Does anybody have a comment on 4? Detect early slowdown?
Yeah. But I think that's one component of it, but it's also detecting any kind of change in community activity. You know, an early slowdown indicates one thing, a rapid increase would indicate something else.
I'm fine with just saying change rather than.
Why does early? What does early give us? Early detection.
I feel like to me, it sounded like prompt detection.
Yeah, I think we don't need that time component to how quickly we detect something. I'm fine with getting rid of that early or prompt or leading. It's at one point we'll also go through and change the first word of every one of these objectives, because some are ing, some are not ing forms.
That's right. We can fix the grammar later. Yeah, I was just trying to get at as a leading indicator of something, and then I sort of dropped off. We can delete that bit.
Okay.
I was trying to make it better, but I don't think it did.
Okay. How about 5? Indicate the potential of maintainer burnout. Who wrote that?
I also wrote this. It's a specific instance of number 4. So detecting community activity, one of the explanations could be that a maintainer is having burnout. So as responses get longer, or yeah, it might be that the maintainer is just overworked. So I don't know if we want to include this very specific objective. I know maintainer burnout is something that is being talked about a lot in recent years.
In the second objective, we have the EG. You know, like to provide some depth. Point being, we could do the same here.
Ah, okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah, I like that.
Are there other?
And I would shorten that a little bit.
Reduction in the
Are
diversity
there
of posts.
other?
What was that, Samantha?
Reduction in the diversity of posts.
Contributors?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be even more vague in order to catch a larger thing, you could also say users.
What is hosts? I guess I didn't know what that word was.
Oh, posts.
Oh, posts.
Contribution.
Okay. Okay. Any others?
Is it how's the response to contributions an indication of diversity of contributions?
It's not an indication. It's a practice that retains new contributors. And if we're recruiting and trying to get new contributors engaged from diverse audiences, which I think we are, then it has an effect on inclusion.
Yes, I agree on the inclusion part. I'm wondering whether it's diversity of contributions or of contributors. Are we talking about the things that people contribute or the people themselves?
My thinking is that it should be contributions or post types or something along those lines, because a leading indicator of burnout for any user across a community starts primarily with a narrowing of their use or value that they're getting from the community. So their posts start to move down in diversity. They're not talking about as many things. They're talking about one thing. Then that one thing starts to peter out, and then there's burnout. So the diversity is a lead metric to the frequency.
Gotcha. No, I understand the relationship. I'm just thinking of whether in this metric, which is responsiveness, time to close, whether time to close indicates something about the types of contributions. That if I'm not making sense, then just ignore what I'm saying.
No, I get what you're saying. You're actually going back to the name of the metric, like what this metric is, which is about responsiveness, which is ultimately a time window thing.
Yeah.
We may actually have to pick this up because we are at the top of the hour.
Yeah, you're right. I feel like we made a lot of good progress. If anybody wants to continue on this, help yourself. These documents are always open for people to just, you know, if you want to make some progress on the metric in between meetings, that's awesome too.
Alrighty.
Thank
Just made
you.
a comment.
All right. With that, I think we'll close it out and see you all again in 2 weeks.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Letting me
Bye.
hop in. Don't let me derail anything.
That was great.
Bye.
All right, I will leave this meeting and join this channel in a minute for the Augur meeting.